Hi, I'm Chris. I make plugins as airwindows, and I'm doing music as Beat Druid, and I'd like to take you into my castle. Yes, it's time to play with Bastl Kastles. I'm going to do this little overview in the hopes of clearing up how to use these little things, and also to remind myself in case I forget. So I've got two of these little guys here. I have built them into rack mount things using Lincane metal material and some little amphenol jacks here. And I've got another video on how to do this. But what I'm going to do right now is go over some of the range of what you can do with these if you really push them. You'll see that there's 3 jacks. One of them goes to the original output. The other one is going to the other jack, which was a stereo jack. The original output is also a stereo jack, but both of the channels are the same. This output, the channels are left and right. The I/O goes to this little part here. As you can see, what I've done with this is I have patched in a little black cable that goes right down here to what this says. It's the reset, LFO reset, and you'll notice that I've bridged it across to this other one. And I'll show you why. I've got a Mother-32 here. And you notice that bears no resemblance to what the Mother is doing. And then I've got another one. You'll notice that is using the stepped output into pitch mod. And in fact, I can also take another wire to timbre mod. You'll notice it's not following this Moog sequencer, but that has a gate output. And when you run through the I/O, through this thing, which is going to be either the left or the right here, into the Kastle and then into here, or indeed if you just patched a patch cable into there. Well, I'll show you. Here's the end of the patch cable. And I plug it in. Voila. As you can see, here, you can get Kastles to behave in a modular synthesizer and in track with them, in sync with them. This is very handy for things like techno or whatever. Now you'll notice I have a kick drum going at a lower rate. I've got that coming from the assign here. If I was to plug it into the same gate, I'd get this. plug it into the sine, now I've turned this one off because it wasn't quite syncing up, but in this one the sine is attached to every 4 beats. Any trigger that you want that's firing off according to this can resynchronize the Kastles using the LFO reset. I've unplugged it. Now I'm going to unplug this for the moment, because there's some other stuff I'm going to try to show you. This one's off right now. In fact, I can unplug these while I'm at it. And I'll demonstrate what this guy is doing. It's got this synchronizing thing going on. It's got the stepped input plugged back into bit in. Bit in manipulates this stepped input. I can actually show you that easier with the other one. One thing you need to know about these little slots, they're all the same connection. It means you can connect multiple wires to the same slot. There's no difference whether you plug it in the left or the right or whatever. It's going to be the same. So now I've got this on its own little LFO. And if I plug the stepped into bit in, it's gone a little bit more random. Plug this into the timbre as well. Another thing you can do with bit in is plug it into the oscillator out. That's also getting us a bit of a more randomness going on. This is the out of the whole synthesizer. So it's the same thing as being plugged into this jack. However, you might ask, if this is the output of the whole synthesizer, what is this? I can show you that. If I plug into R, or if I plug into this goes to IOR. What I'll show you is that this os output is it's just an oscillator. This is the LFO. This is the sine wave oscillator. But this is just this one oscillator. This one doesn't do anything to it, whereas the wave shape, that's controlling the duty cycle of the pulse wave that this represents. Now remember this LFO? We can plug the sine wave into pitch mod here. It's a little steppy. But not as steppy as this. Remember this? Guess what? We can still plug into the gate, and then this is a good way to do sort of strange techno-y things. And since we have the stepped input, we can also apply it to, there we go, timbre mod. Actually, it's not responding to timbre mod as much as I would have liked. Or we could plug into the bit in, and now we have a slightly more randomized thing. Again, the Moog is providing the click. It's coming through here, and it's coming through these wires. It's going into LFO reset, and then bit in is providing the stepped, and we're just listening to this oscillator. Or we can put the stepped output into the LFO reset as well as the Moog. It'll do these random things and then kind of run with them. And again, since it's only the LFO reset, it'll tend to sort of sit with the notes if you've got this LFO going slowly. It's overlapping a bit. And then we've got it synchronized again. And again, since we're listening to only the oscillator output, this one doesn't do anything. If we were listening to the main out like this, this is the same as this output. But this is much more aggressive sound. You can also do things like plug the sine wave LFO into, say, also the pitch. Pretty aggressive. This is the same as patching it directly to the stepped. The wave shape can also be modulated by stuff. For instance, since we also have a square wave output, we can plug that into the pitch and get a little bit of a melody without really being much of one. Although that may actually be doing the other oscillator more. Usually I'll get effects out of this at sort of the fringes of the adjustment, like I got the wave shape barely engaging here. So we've talked about pitch mod, timbre mod. This is the way that you get it to synchronize with external stuff. This is the way you get it to do your little sequency melodies, is you put it into stepped. Patch bit into stuff, such as this, to get more interesting results. You patch to osc directly in order to get a really sharp kind of square wave pulse width modulator. And lastly, let's talk about some of the stuff you can do with different waveform generators. And to do that, I'm going to unpatch this and unpatch this, and in fact, we do have it working in tempo, but we don't actually need it to for this. So here we've got everything kind of zeroed out. This is still patched, but we don't even really need it. It's having an effect, but that's not what we're worried about right now. The remaining thing is this plus and minus and the mode. I've talked about these little guys. Again, the three connections are all the same. They're just normal together. Rate mod, I suppose I can demonstrate rate mod. I didn't actually tell about that, but it's quite simple. If I patch, say, pitch mod, causing this to be the square wave, so it's modulating pitch simply on a sort of square oscillator. I could also do the more triangle-y thing, but instead what we're going to do is patch into rate mod and patch that into, surprise, surprise, a different one. So if I patch into this one's LFO, notice it turned down all the way. Faster. Seems to be adding LFO speed, which is fine. We're modulating this LFO with the speed of this LFO. It's a frequency modulation. In fact, as such, we can simply take our little I/O here, patch this into the sawtooth waveform of this one. And one remaining thing I do need to do, this is what was screwing it up. I had it patched into the gate, so this is why it wasn't doing quite what I expected. But note how it's going faster and faster? This LFO is being manipulated by this LFO. And then it'll slow down again. And we can speed this rate up as well. And of course, since it's an FM synthesis, and we've got it patched into this I/O here, we can get a kind of bass thing going on. And then, in order to get real silly, I may need to go and dig up a longer little patch cable for this. I can take, see, this one's going from this LFO to here. I got a spare patch in this LFO, so I can go from this LFO to here. And then if I turn up, they're being cross-modulated. I like doing that a lot. So what we get is a very weird behavior where the frequencies of each are being modulated by the output of each other. And again, we've got something patched into the... Well, actually, let's be real interesting. I can do this in stereo. Check this out. The recording won't show the stereo. You might be able to hear a little tiny bit of it, just because it'll be different speakers in the room. So that's not very loud, but this is the output of the triangle waveforms. And we can get a big rowdy drone sound. And we're not even listening to the output of the synthesizer. We're listening only to the output of the LFOs. These no longer do anything, because we're using only the LFO for this. Pretty heavy, huh? And again, as I said, I can put it in stereo. And then if we're using that as both of the LFOs, we could patch them into the rest of the synth. This has now got the synthesizer completely decoupled. Oh, and one more thing. This can still be re-triggered by the gate. This sound is coming entirely out of the Kastle. They are both being re-triggered at the same time. If I unplug this one, I get half of the effect. How's that for a big rumbly noise? Again, Kastle only. You could do this with just a batch of Kastles. I think the possibilities are endless. I'm not sure what you can do as far as VCAs are concerned, but this is not requiring a VCA. This is just the output of the Kastle LFOs alone. Only thing that's happening is it's being triggered by this. And again, if we go from the sine, which is a quarter of the rate, stepped, I'm sorry. And then this stepped to our pitch output. Now what's happening there was I've got this crazy LFO thing going, which is its sound in its own right, but it's continuous. And then I am running the stepped output and the pitch of the synthesizers off of that alone. I never did show you, the different kinds of waveforms. So while we've got this patched as just only a sequence, let's start explaining that part. Hush. This mode thing, mode right here, is how you pick different waveforms, and I haven't touched that yet. What we've got here is the basic one. Again, this is both of the wires go, both the connections go to the same thing. This one up here is different. This is always minus and this is always plus, and that does not have all the same connections, much like the one above it. Above it there's left and right, and one is always left and one is always right. So if you have it not connected at all, what we get is phase modulation. This is phase modulation. And it's sort of your default Bastl Kastle noise. But the thing is, if you patch into different things, like the minus or the plus, if the modulation signal plugged into this, and it doesn't have to be a fixed voltage, is negative, it goes into phase distortion. Phase distortion sounds like this. Negative. This has some great screechy, horrible noises. If you plug it into the plus, just a moment. Now that's some good techno right there. Sorry, back to our work. If you plug it into the plus, what you get is track and hold modulation. There's the plus. As you can see, this one is hanging on to this. Now you'll notice we seemed to kind of lose our wonderful pitchy thing. That can be easily fixed. Another patch into the stepped, and this one is going to respond to timbre mod, which I believe affects this one. We'll find out. Sure enough. So we're now patched into pitch and timbre. This plus one wants to respond more to timbre modulation. And that is another way of getting the kind of melody thing going on. And again, we can still patch things into, say, bit in. This is always a good one. It's a feedback. It's I patched. This is connected to ground. It was touching ground, and it went like this. But if we patch it to bit in, we get a more random behavior. And again, gives us a kind of random modular bass going on. See, this has all kinds of uses for constructing strange modular things, because if you remember correctly, we already did a sort of double kick drum just based off of syncing it and listening to the LFOs only. And we're not still patched through. Well, no, this one's still patched through, so So this has all kinds of possibilities if you know what you're patching into and why. I realize it seems like just a craziness factory, and it kind of still is. But if you know what you're doing, the craziness can expand hugely. For instance, here's our mode, and we had it plugged into the track and hold plus. Track and hold is here. We got a nice sort of chirpy thing going on there. So we can probably manipulate one of these to adjust that. If I change timbre, it does this. The pitch change goes away. And if I change pitch, it does this. I think it's affecting that a little bit. And then when I take this and patch it into the LFO output, we've got that patched through so that, I remember, this is the output of the Kastle. It's just one Kastle at this point. And it's being gated. If I take that gate away, you just get this. But if you're triggering the reset, the LFO reset, you get this tracking very nicely to the gate. Because it's just an electronic circuit, it doesn't even have to interpret anything, it just goes. And that was interesting enough that we're going to patch the rate mod, which will manipulate that LFO, into the LFO of the other one. Check this out. With that manipulating the speed of this LFO, I can slow this one right down. And they're both being reset. However, I can change that by taking this patch this LFO reset now goes to what I've done is decoupled this LFO from the sync, and it's not being triggered by anything. And then this one is still being triggered by the gate. we've got is this is now very slow, but it's being re-triggered all the time. And the one that's driving it is not synchronized. That's making a bunch of strange noises. But since we have this, on Eurorack setup, one thing we can do is, for instance, take this output that we've got right here, that we've got patched into the output, and that goes into the right channel. So that's coming out here. The same thing that you're hearing is also on this cable now. So if I take and patch it into external audio, we are now patching the Kastle through the Mother-32. It's very quiet because the Kastle doesn't work on full Eurorack voltages. It's a fine thing that it can survive the gate coming in, but it doesn't really use normal Eurorack voltages. So your LFOs will be weaker, the output of the signal is going to be weaker. That's just how it works. It's fine. And as such, we can patch it through this funny thing. Or we can unpatch mode from this. And again, right now, we're working with this sound. Let's go and get something really harsh. Pretty harsh. And then it comes through this. The oscillator is now the Bastl Kastle. So again, you got to remember that the levels aren't going to be the same. But it's possible to use these things in very interesting ways. And again, I mentioned the oscillator as being not exactly full level. Sometimes you don't need that. For instance, here's this going into the VCO mod. Or indeed we'll go into VCO linear FM. Or tell you what, that was already an FM patch. See? See, this is the real frequency. But if we just patch in our Bastl Kastle output, or indeed linear FM, and that's using the oscillator out. Or remember this, that's now patched into the output. So we're gonna unplug all of this for a moment. If you remember, when we patch oscillator out this into one of the outputs, what we're really getting is this. And that explains why I wasn't getting a coherent result. So what we'll do is we'll set this to be a nice sort of even thing. And we are also resetting it a lot. And as a final thing, I'm going to try to make the Kastle into a FM oscillator that is in some way tracking the Moog. That'll be interesting. So first thing we're going to do is not worry about using it as a reset. We're no longer plugging into LFO reset. So this L is where we're getting out of the Kastle. So what I'm going to do is go and find its keyboard output, which I've got here. So that's giving me the melody. Not that it's much of a melody, but you know. So now the keyboard output, the melody is coming into here, so I'll patch it into, let's see, pitch. That is now the frequency that I'm sending through to there. So what I'm going to do is take the output of that, and we're going into VCO linear FM. And now I'm playing the sequencer on the Mother-32 as a keyboard. And as you can hear, it's taking this as an FM oscillator, but it's not tracking perfectly, so we get interesting results. And I think I can slide to, yes I can. Maybe it's not going to let me glide, that's okay. I'll worry about that later. There you are. Remember, when we've got this patch through, that additional waveform oh, I don't have to patch through anymore. That additional waveform goes silent. So this is the FM off. And then we're messing with the frequency modulation of it. So while we're at it, we might want to do something like patch the LFO through to wave shape. And then we'll frequency modulate the position of this. It might be a little much, so what we'll do is we'll turn down the... This is patching directly into the wave shape. Oh, I know. How about how's that for an interesting bass sound? But wait, there's more. So right now what I've got is this that was formerly known as our gate, but that's been patched through to the Mother-32's keyboard input. But remember how I was doing a gate, and that was plugged through to here, and this connected to the gate? And then I had one spare connection. I'll tell you what, let's swap one of these guys out. How about you? The wave shape is having a fairly strong result, but remember how we had the LFO reset coming through gate, which is currently active, and then I just normaled it through using this wire in such a way that it could just stay patched before I reused it again. What we can do is have both of these guys patched through. And now the FM synthesis is running in its own little sequence inside the Kastle. So now I've got a very interesting sound happening that's very strongly affected by VCO Lin FM. You can patch this through some kind of attenuator in order to dial it down. Remember, what this guy is doing is this. Actually, I don't hear anything there, so let's go back. So, linear FM. And that's interesting too. that's been my little exploration of the Bastl Kastle. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's kind of strange, and usually if you hear this stuff, it'll be with me running everything through a mixing board rather than just listening over my monitor speakers. But this is my rig for just capturing quick hacking and seeing what we can do. And it's been an hour of this, and hopefully it's been pretty interesting. Like I said, you can do an awful lot with these you can do a lot of damage with these little buggers. So it's a fine thing to acquire. Lots of Bastl Kastles. They have a new version. It's supposed to sound better, which I'm not sure is even relevant to the kinds of things I'm doing with them, because half the time I like it when they sound incredibly heinous. So go figure. But I have been Chris from Airwindows with my little friends. And yes, the FM synth patch and this are happening at the same time. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.